What's up, everybody? Thank you for joining us today. So I'm super excited to be your moderator for our session today. The name of today's session is Web 2.5, How Web3 Games Are Going Mainstream. Please do not run away based on that title. We think there's going to be something here for people building games on kind of both sides of the coin. So why we wanted to host this with our friends that are joining us today, the Web3 and crypto gaming ecosystem is definitely in an exciting and crazy spot right now. And there's both a lot of games building from the Web3 native space that are looking how to bring their products more mainstream. And there's also a lot of traditional game companies that are once again becoming Web3 or crypto curious and trying to see what they can learn from that side of the coin. So we've brought together a panel of experts today from different parts of that spectrum, and we're going to dig into this topic. So we think there'll be kind of something for everyone here who's working at that intersection of kind of traditional and Web3 gaming technologies and looking to scale those games. So without further ado, we have an awesome panel of experts joining us today. We have Ben, who is the partnerships manager at Adjust. We have Francois, who oversees marketing at Eyeball Games. We have Stefano, who is the marketing lead at Immutable, and I am Warren. I'm the co-founder of the growth marketing company Upptic. All right, without further ado, guys, first of all, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. And maybe just for those that haven't met each of you yet, just a little bit more about your business, your personal work, and what you're doing at kind of this cross-section of traditional gaming and Web3 gaming. And Francois, do you want to start us out here with a little bit about your background and your team's work?
Of course, yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me, first of all. Super happy to be here. So as you said, I've been working with the folks at Eyeball Games for a little bit over a year and a half now as a strategic advisor. The interesting thing about Eyeball Games is that the leading title, as you know, is Pull Masters, because we work together. And love the category. The interesting thing is what really ticked me about this project. The co-founders are also the co-founders of 8Ball Pool, which is like the leading pool, mobile pool gaming in the category. And they co-founded this game like 12 years ago, sold it to Miniclip. And then today, about like a year and a half, 2 years ago, they decided to just like up the antes and just create this amazing new pool game and really want to revolutionize the category. And one of the tools that we're going to use to do that is a little bit of Web3, right? So as you said earlier, Web3 curious, right? It's not the core, but it's definitely part of it. And we see some big benefits coming out of it, right? From a marketing perspective, for me, it's definitely like, an enhanced emotional connection that is totally possible, which will lead to like more engagement and ultimately more monetization. So I've been in the Web2 industry for 15 years. I was working as an executive vice president of marketing at Ludia, which is a publisher out of Montreal, mobile gaming. And we were acquired by Jam City in 2021. And so I've been advising ever since and came across this project that I think is super interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Francois. And speaking of that little bit of Web3 that you have as part of Pool Masters and part of your company's DNA, part of that is the technology you're building on, some of which is some of the technology built by Immutable, which is one of our other guests today. So for those that are not too familiar with Immutable, they have both like their platform and technology side as well as their game publishing and studio side. And Stefano, why don't you share a little bit more about kind of the mission of Immutable and your role there?
Yeah, perfect. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Super happy to join this panel. So in terms of my role, what we've been doing at Immutable, I joined Immutable already a year ago, focusing heavily on the launch of Guild of Guardians, which is the latest game that we launched as Immutable Game Studio in May 2024. And my role has been leading the marketing effort and the release of the game. And as Warren mentioned, the game is built on the Immutable stack, right? Which I think it's a super interesting product that we have finally marketed. It finally addressed one of the biggest complexity of the previous cycle of Web3 gaming, where UX was very bad. If you recall, if you've been in crypto for a while, you played Axie Infinity, desktop-based game. You need to have a wallet. You need to, the onboarding, the whole friction is incredible. And Immutable is bringing to market products that actually helps developers, game studios to break that friction and actually having a Web 2 kind of experience. And so that's the value proposition that we have. We bring incredible developing product for studios, and we saw it at play with Guild of Guardians.
Awesome, thank you, Stefano. And Ben, to round us out, Adjust is kind of working on a different part of this marketing puzzle. And if you can give a little background to Adjust, your role there, and why what Adjust is building is also something that is relevant to teams that are kind of at this cross-section of Web3 and mobile.
I'm Ben. I'm a partnerships manager over here at Adjust. If people aren't aware of what Adjust is, we're a mobile measurement partner. So it's an analytics platform that helps app marketers and developers understand and optimize user acquisition, engagement, and retention. So we do everything from attribution and user tracking to segmentation and insights, fraud prevention, deep linking, custom journeys, analytics and reportings, and then most importantly, what's important to Web3, privacy and privacy compliance there. So a little bit about us at Adjust.
Awesome. Thank you, Ben. So I think, while all of us here are dabbling or maybe even all in on Web3 technologies and gaming, one thing that all four of us have in common is we all came from the mobile marketing space. So maybe, Stefano, if you want to start here, I'm curious, a little bit about your origin story of what made you, as someone who came from traditional mobile like myself, what made you first piqued your interest about Web3 and made you interested in seeing what Web3 can add to games?
A bit of my experience, I've been in the digital marketing space for now 10 years across every facet of it, from operation, from MarTech, execution. So I've seen the whole colors, the whole spectrum of it. I think what really drove me towards the Web3 gaming space is really the fact that we are the conjuncture in time where we finally have technology that is comparable to the Web 2 experience. And once you have that, then the onboarding of users becomes very easy. And so when it comes to mobile marketing for Web3 games, then being in this point in time, it's the transition between Web 2 to Web 3 for app promotion becomes very easy because you're able to attract users that are playing common Web 2 games. They can onboard on Web 3 games super easily without having to do any heavy lifting. I think that's what attracted me to take on this challenge because I think it's the right moment in time.
Francois, I'm going to take the same question to you. I mean, similar to Stefano, I mean, you had a well-established career in traditional mobile gaming. What made you jump off the ledge and dig into this cross-section of Web3 and mobile that you're doing with Eyeball?
Yeah, I touched upon it a little bit earlier, but for me, it's an additional opportunity, right? So, we've been in this industry for a long, long time. And I think there's for any genre of games in the mobile gaming industry, there's kind of a playbook that's out there for everybody to see, right? Whatever the genre you have, right? So game design for whatever, RPG or match 3, game design, monetization tricks, right? First time offer, level up offer, events and whatnot. So you've got all these tools well set. And, what attracted me to the Web3 component was, I really saw it as an additional tool that you can really leverage. And from a marketing perspective, it's really a tool that will really allow you to just improve and increase that emotional connection that a user can have with a game, right? And so for me, it's all about engagement, right? Via ownership. So this idea that somebody can own something, right, and get something out of it, I think is a super powerful tool to just extend the lifetime value of a user, right? And its level of engagement and ultimately the monetization, as I said, right? So there's a lot of challenges, right? There's still some friction. I'm trying to shift that paradigm, and Stefano made some good point, but that's really what attracted me. I'm not saying that I want it to be core of the gaming experience. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm looking at. Because I think ultimately, contrary to Xfinity and whatnot, I really, really want to make sure that we have an amazing game first and foremost, right? I want to blur that border between that line between Web 2 and Web 3. Like I don't want to talk about Web 2 and Web 3 anymore at one point. I just want people to play the game and understand in a frictionless manner that, hey, okay, I have that game loop, and oh, by the way, I can own, I can trade, I have this community, and I can just play some more. So that's really what's compelling about Web3 from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you touched on, a belief that I really think too, which is like, we don't really need to, especially as the segment evolves, think of like Web3 games as so much a segment. Really, I think my personal thesis is it'll be a little more boring in the future. Like this will just be described as like a Lego piece, just something that game developers and game marketers have as another lever to make game loops more interesting, to make marketing funnels more interesting.
I decided to develop a game using Unity versus Unreal Engine. I added a Web3 component. It's nothing more. My thesis has always been, and applies across the entire space, is when you use Spotify, you don't care if it's built on Google Cloud or AWS. You just press the button, 20 millisecond, no buffering song. And will be the same in Web3. You don't care if it's built on a certain chain. You just want to make sure the experience is great. And you drive the use case for the user, which is for gaming is entertainment, fun.
Yeah, well put. So all of us here are also working, at the somewhat in the cross section of growth, user acquisition. Ben, I'd love to go to you to kind of start from a little table setting of like, what is the state of user acquisition and measurement for folks that are working at this cross section of Web3 and mobile? What are some of the conversations you're having? What are some of the needs of the teams building the space that you're seeing?
Yeah. Well, let's dive into how Web3 and Web 2.5 games are really stepping up their, user acquisition game by leveraging traditional mobile tools like we have over here at Adjust. So first off, there's cross-channel UA, which is a huge one. Web3 games are now able to run campaigns on mainstream ad networks, just like Web2 games do. So with an MMP, they can track user journeys seamlessly across both Web2 and the blockchain channels, so nothing gets missed. This ability to track across channels makes it easier to reach new audiences and understand how they're moving through each part of the journey. Then we have complex attribution, which Web3 games can now get granular with their tracking, following users from the initial install all the way through to setting up a wallet and exploring blockchain features. So this kind of detail helps optimize ad spend, ensuring that they're investing in the right users, those who actually engage with those core blockchain features. It's all about making the most out of each dollar spent. And then next is, data-driven insights. Traditional mobile metrics like LTV and retention are extremely valuable for Web3. So by looking at these metrics, they're finding out which user segments are truly valuable and can measure ROI more precisely, which is critical for strategic growth in a space that's still evolving. And then there's privacy compliance as well. So for many users, privacy is a big concern, especially with crypto. So Adjust and other MMPs, we bring a strong privacy protocol to the table, which eases some of the security concerns that mainstream users might have about Web3. So ultimately, this whole approach allows Web3 games to combine traditional and crypto audiences, bridging the two worlds in a way that promotes sustainable, scalable growth across both ecosystems. So it's a powerful mix of traditional mobile expertise with the potential of Web3. And it's helping these games reach and retain a broader, more engaged audience.
Yeah, well put, Ben. So Francois, on that note of bridging the worlds, like what is kind of your assessment of like the new challenges that you're seeing at this intersection?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, and we've worked together, you and I, on this topic, but it's, From my perspective, what I've seen right now is like the traditional channels for Web3, they're difficult to scale from my perspective, right? We've worked with KOLs, we've worked with DAOs, alpha calls and whatnot, and we've tried to create virality among the community, and it worked to a certain extent, right? And I think that from my perspective, as I said, I always go back to the core, right? It's like I'm trying to shift the paradigm, right? It's like, I want to create a great gaming experience first and foremost, and have the ability to use the traditional UA channels to fill in the top of the funnel and scale in a sustainable manner, right? And once I have these people in the game, build trust, right? And in a matter where eventually I have the opportunity to introduce and educate, if necessary, what the benefits are of a Web3 component that will be presented to them in the game, right? So I think one of the examples I refer to often is NFL Rivals, right? Like they have a sense of trust. They've been able to scale substantially through traditional means of UA channels, and you know, they've associated themselves with like amazing IPs, which brought a lot of trust at the NFL, obviously. Great game also. And so I think eventually, I mean, this game is launched like about 2 years ago, right? And eventually they've been able to build a solid, sustainable, engaged community of players. And that's what I'm looking for to do. That's what I want to do as well with Pool Masters, right? So great game, build trust, have the ability to scale, and therefore use the traditional UA channels, and again, like blur that line between Web 2 and Web 3, but ultimately attract people who play traditional freemium games, and you know, really have the opportunity to educate them through newsletters or social and whatnot of the benefit of what Web 2 can bring to them, right? Web 3 can bring to them via ownership and whatnot. So trying to shift that paradigm, right? You and I are working on this as well. You know, we use traditional UA channels as well. We've used KOL and Web3 channels as well. But I think the scale is still on we need to make the traditional UA channel work.
And speaking of scale, you know, it's the biggest games in Web3 are still, you know, they're still not at the size of the biggest traditional mobile games. Like Stefano, for Guild of Guardians, which, you know, I had the pleasure of working on with you for a bit, like, you guys made quite a splash because you crossed that 1 million player threshold, which is still quite notable for games building on Web3 technology. It definitely was like not a smooth ride from A to Z. And like, I think there's a lot of emerging problems when you're working at that cross section. So like, what are some of the kind of like emergent challenges that you have discovered launching of Guild of Guardians and working at games at this cross section?
Super valid question. Multiple challenges, but as well as opportunities. Of course, the moment you add the Web3 component to a game, and we consider even if it's a Lego component into your stack, you attract user behavior that are not present in the traditional Web2 org. So people that come in to extract value from the game because they see monetary value. So there's an additional layer of complexity that makes harder to manage the game lifecycle purely from a product perspective. But as well as from a user acquisition perspective, because the moment you have that layer of financialization, then you, when you start tapping into Web3 audience, you will start to attract that kind of profile. So that's one of the big challenges that we faced. But we worked on the assumption and the conviction that the game we built is a fun game. It is a cross-section. We give an experience that looks and feels like a Web2 experience, leveraging the Immutable stack. And therefore, when we went to do user acquisition campaigns, we doubled down heavily on traditional UA channels, Meta, Google, TikTok. And we did that focusing on a messaging that was very rarely focused on the Web3 aspect of the game, but mostly focused on the Web2 or the classic game aspect, like it's an RPG, it's an auto battler, it's fun. And that's how we attract user. And echoing what Francois said, the paradigm shift needs to be, I'm building a game and I add the Web3 layer. It's not, I'm building a Web3 game. I want to build a Web3 game. Let me figure out how to make it fun. We literally flip the script because there's excitement about Web3 and we need to go back to first principle. I'm building a game that is fun, is entertaining, and and can be monetized with a long lifetime value and high lifetime value. How do I use the Web3 component to increase the lifetime value, to extend the community part of a game, right? The moment you add the classic community and then you add ownership, then you can extend that. And that's, I think, how we should think about it. And once you have that in mind, when you go into UA, then the line really blurs between Web 2 and Web 3. You can apply the same playbook of Web 2 and then educate them.
Yeah, on that note, I mean, let's make this tactical. Let's go deeper into tactics next for scaling games at this cross section. And we'll kind of break this up. Like, I want to start by talking about marketing within kind of Web3 native ecosystems, speaking to people that are already entrenched. And I'll just like share like one, if you take one tip from this from mine up top, like when you're trying to reach Web3 natives and Web3 native channels, paid ads actually are a horrible way to do this. And I say this as someone who basically makes the bulk of my living working in paid marketing. So like that was something that became very clear for our team at Upptic, like working on teams at this intersection is like, okay, if we can use traditional user acquisition, but it needs to be when you're going for like kind of regular normie players. If you want to speak to Web3 natives, you have to be active in Web3 native spaces and speaking in natural ways. So for us, that's more working with like content creators, doing sort of partnerships of cross promotion within other like-minded Web3 communities. You get real weird and real creative real quick, but I don't know. Francois, maybe you can speak here to within your team, just a bit on sort of like Web3 native marketing and what's different about that, and then we'll back out from that to traditional user acquisition in the next part.
Absolutely. So you're really talking to a different breed, right? As you mentioned, and therefore the environment is pretty vast, and this is one of the key reasons. By the way, it's not a plug, but it's true. It's the reason why we reach out to Upptic as well, because Warren and his team have built relationships for the past few years, trustworthy relationships with influencers, with forums as well. And these are the kind of channels that you need to reach out to in order to talk to these people who have like very particular goals, right? And we've also worked with Immutable as well. We were fortunate enough to be one of their partners when they launched one of their quests, and that attracted a substantial amount of players. But again, I will say, the scale was limited. And what I'm always afraid of is that, as you said, Warren, like, these people, and I think Stefano mentioned it earlier. I mean, they're in it, like the financial aspect is extremely important to them. And what I'm always afraid of is that it's going to peak at first, right? The level of interest. And then, if you have your token event or whatever you mint, then it just like crashes and burn afterwards, right? So I'm a little bit afraid of that, and that's why I'm really eager to again like shift that paradigm and just like focus on the game as well, and introduce that Web3 component afterwards, right? Because it's a natural extension. Anyways, it's a natural extension of what we're trying to build here, which is a great game. And I think really it's part of it. It's really part of making a game even better than what we've seen so far. So I really believe that Web 2, Web 3, whatever, we can scale this with traditional channels. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's through KOLs, through alpha calls and DAOs, but it's been more difficult for us, like in terms of scale, I would say.
Yeah, Stefano, anything you'd like to add here as far as like tactics that you've seen work better with Web3 natives, or even just learnings of what doesn't work as well with Web3 natives?
100% aligned with Francois said. I'll add a couple of things from my experience. So, Web3 natives really love to capture value. So one tactic that we use in incentivization through pre-registering, you will receive X amount of value when the game launches, really helps to attract that cohort of users that are really farming for those kind of airdrops or value, right? Future value. Questing, of course, worked always, but again, it always taps into that emotion of I'm doing something to receive a reward after. You're not moving the user base because there's an expectation that the game is going to be good or not going to be good. We have seen situations where you literally talk to customer at events, and the Web3 cohort is like not a spender. They care about the game, but even if the game is not performing really well on their device, I still play it because I expect a future financial value. So it's a very tough audience. One thing that for sure I've learned when it comes to UA is there are a lot of Web3 ad network on the market that are popping up We use on-chain data to do targeting and segmentation. Since the audience is still very small, those kind of strategies and tactics tend to not work very well at the moment. And as well as not always trackable, especially if we look at the mobile environment MMPs, not all of them are integrated. So those are tactics that are heavily sold on the market. I think it's still too early to leverage them to drive scale and effective user acquisition.
I'll just add, like Stefano, you brought up an important point that we actually leverage as well. It's virality, right? Like encourage people to take actions, invite people as well. But to your point, Stefano, there has to be like, it's quid pro quo, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to do this. What am I going to get in return, right? And so it's a difficult proposition. But we did find some success there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of cringe at using the term, but we keep coming back to this concept of like Web 2.5 games that are kind of at this, cross section of traditional, in our case, traditional mobile games and Web 3. So I want to go a little bit more into the data and measurement side, because I think one theme that we probably all agree on is whether you're doing Web3 native marketing or traditional marketing, we still want to measure and quantify everything as people that are interested in the performance of marketing. So Ben, I would love to go to you here as our expert in the attribution space. So how will mobile attribution technologies like Adjust, how are these still going to be kind of a core piece for helping games building this cross-section, achieving their growth goals across both traditional channels and maybe non-traditional channels as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, Web 2.5 games are really exciting because they blend the accessibility and ease of traditional Web 2 experiences with the ownership and compatibility of Web 3. So mobile attribution tools like Adjust would play a key role in driving growth across both crypto native and mainstream channels. So I'm going to break down like basically how that works. So there's seamless cross-channel attribution, which Adjust would make that easy for a Web 2.5 game to track user acquisition across both mainstream ad networks and crypto native channels. So this means that developers can understand how campaigns are performing across different spaces and maximizing their reach effectively. Then there's user level behavioral insights. The one unique aspect of Web 2.5 games is their diverse audience, which that includes both crypto enthusiasts and the traditional gamers. So with Adjust Analytics, we can segment users based on their behaviors, like in-app purchases or engagement patterns and acquisition sources, giving developers insights needed to fine-tune strategies for each type of player. And then there's tracking conversions across wallets and accounts. So, using Adjust, you can track how users transition from traditional Web 2 experiences to blockchain-based features using custom events and deep linking. So Adjust helps identify when a user installs a game and later sets up a wallet to access in-game assets. This visibility into the conversion funnel really helps developers understand how mainstream users adopt blockchain features and optimize into this journey. And then, of course, protecting data privacy and security with blockchain. Data privacy and security is, important to say the least. So with Adjust and, mobile measurement providers, we have strong privacy protocols that ensure user data is protected, which helps build trust, especially among mainstream users who may be new to this blockchain. And then there's leveraging decentralized data, which is also measuring impact. So with Adjust, Web 2.5 games can leverage decentralized on-chain data while still maintaining centralized insights, making it easier to track the impact of blockchain-powered features and make data-driven decisions. So in short, or rather in long, Adjust allows Web 2.5 games to blend the engagement and growth strategies of Web 2 with the unique benefits of Web 3, like ownership and new monetization models. So this lets them grow across both mainstream and crypto native audiences, just positioning them for sustainable success.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, and I'll add, there's some kind of low-hanging fruit ways. We're dealing with pretty complex economies and pretty complex cross-sections of data sets when we're talking Web 2.5. And that can be really intimidating for some teams. And sometimes that encourages teams to just not measure because it's a tough problem. But I really encourage teams, put in a little bit of extra work. If you can measure your work and your competitors can't, it's a huge edge to state the obvious. But that's all to say there's some very like low-hanging fruit ways you can use even like a traditional attribution provider such as Adjust to measure some of the on-chain things. Like one thing that we did for a game that we're supporting early launch for is we just mapped essentially any in-game transaction that would correspond to a blockchain transaction, and we just mapped that as an Adjust event. So that way, even though it was just kind of a shortcut to bringing signals from the on-chain activity directly into the Adjust data set, so then we could still use those for both analytics, but even for then events that you can optimize with on the ad network. So you can actually set up an ad campaign optimizing to an on-chain event because you mapped that on-chain event to an Adjust thing. So just giving an example here, like we're in kind of the Wild West, but there's some payoffs for thinking outside the box as far as like how you use these on-chain elements. Anyway, yeah, I'd love to go, Stefano, maybe to you here as well too, for any additional comments that you have for measurement at this cross section and any learnings from your team side.
From our side, of course, if we look at Guild Guardians is a mobile game, right? So it presents opportunities and challenges. Of course, we put a massive stress and focus on working with our MMP provider to, as Warren mentioned, have an edge in terms of tracking. And at the same time, working with our internal data team to make sure that we are able to have full visibility of what happens on chain. I think this is key for any Web2, Web3 game, to have strong foundation in tracking. If they can partner with Adjust or any similar partner where they can have out of the box integration with the chain, even better. I think the industry is really in need of tools like that can help to remove the heavy lifting of doing an in-house integration between traditional Web2 tracking and Web3 transaction on chain. This is key, but of course it depends on how your game is built. In our case, we have a good amount of transactions happening on chain, which are also revenue driving transactions. So for us, it's very key to understand and map that back to a user that we have acquired through UA, because then it contributes to our return on ad spend and our LTV. So it's a key for a Web 2.5, Web 3 game to have that in place, especially if you're on mobile.
Just to make sure that we cover kind of all the key areas we want to touch on. I know we've already gotten quite into the heart of things, and we're getting tighter on time here. I do want to go next to some of the like kind of fraud and strange behavior that might emerge in this section. So Web3 gaming is still definitely like it's Wild West, early era, and it becomes increasingly tricky sometimes because we also have items that have potential real world value in some of these game economies, because all of a sudden you can trade items in the game that you couldn't before, or there might be a token. So having this additional potential financial incentives can drive even new kinds of suspicious behaviors sometimes in player activity. So what are some of the tools growth marketers can use to ensure that their UA and growth marketing they're doing are still being scaled in a safe and effective way, and kind of mindful of these trends? And Francois, maybe you can start us out here.
I don't have much to say. I rely on Ben and his team, to be honest with you. Like I really am. I want out of the box, like Stefano said. I want out of the box solutions to make sure that we can prevent fraud and make sure that we can actually. Because you're right? It's like it's one of the roadblocks. It's like I always go back to that. It's trust, right? And in order to instigate trust, instill trust into our community, we have to prevent like fraudulent behavior. And so, that's one of the reasons why we partner with Ben and Adjust, because we feel confident that we're going to prevent this type of behavior within our game, right? Especially if we attract like mostly a Web2 audience at first, and we want to build trust with these people and make sure that they engage with the Web2 components, it'll be imperative to have solutions that filter out these type of behavior. And then again, we work with you as well, Warren, because when we want to talk to Web3 specific players, it is a vast universe, and you have, and your team, you have built like a lot of relationships over the last 2-3 years as well, and they're trustworthy. So So when you combine this, I believe it's one of the tools that I have to make sure that, you know, it is trustworthy on within our game. And of course, you know, we work with Immutable, and we work with all of you folks, right? That's the funny thing. And Immutable has been great partner for Layer 2, and so, yeah, when you combine all this together, I think it's safe to say that, you know, our game will be engaging and will be safe.
Yeah, so I mean, we have all new kinds of fraud and scams and abuse in this kind of emerging sector of gaming. That does not mean that the traditional types of fraud and bad behavior problems disappear just because there's new ones in addition. Ben, I have a feeling you might have like a few thoughts on things that developers can do and how Adjust fits into that stack of safety for them.
Yeah, just a small amount. No, so I mean, with Adjust, I mean, that's what we're here for too. Is you know, we like to say fraud prevention. You know, we don't want to do it after the fact. We don't want to waste advertising dollars. So, you know, we have real-time fraud detection, you know, that instantly blocks fake clicks and installs that would, like I said, prevent budgets from being wasted on low quality or bot-driven users. We have click spam and injection prevention, install hijacking protection, as well as device level fraud checks. And then behavioral analytics is another one. You know, besides the fraud suite, you know, we go beyond the install to analyze user behavior as they enter the game. So we can identify engaged users and monitor the in-game activity, you know, helping improve audience quality and keeping those campaigns focused on these high-valued users who are more likely to stick around. So yeah, with the fraud prevention suite, Web3 marketers can scale campaigns securely, focusing their budgets on authentic users and building sustainable growth over time. This ensures, like I said, that every dollar is spent effectively driving the right users into the game, real users into the game, and supporting that growth while keeping the ad spend, you know, efficient and protected.
I think this is kind of like tip of the iceberg, right? I think our session today is kind of intended for kind of the curious on both sides. Web3 games scaling traditional markets and traditional games that are starting to dabble in Web3 technology as it's emerging. I know we're about at the end of our time. So I guess for like our last round robin here, y'all have been working at this cross section for a minute now. And so I guess just sort of like a parting thought, like for any new teams that are building or considering building at this cross section of mobile and Web3, like what is a piece of sage advice you would offer, kind of like if I knew then what I know now? And maybe Francois, if you want to kick us off here, like a piece of advice for new people in the space.
I sound like a broken record, but first and foremost, just think about the game. Think about the gamers. Make a great game that's going to be sticky. It's going to be fun, and then, you know, use the Web3 component as an extra tool to maximize emotional connection and engagement with your player community. I think that is key, and we're starting to see this more and more. I really believe that Pull Masters is one of those games that people are going to find it really, really fun. So no matter what, if you come from Web3, if you come from Web2, first and foremost, I want you to like the game, because if you don't, then it's just absolutely useless to talk about all that we've talked about over the last 30 minutes. So great game, keep the people, build trust, right? And then, you know, baby steps. They'll start trading, and you'll build an extra community of traders as well, and they'll see the incremental value of ownership. So, and you know, we'll do. I mean, we have like great stuff to introduce to our gamers, but yeah, I think ownership and monetization and trading will be well received once you start with a good game.
Yeah, it really all does come down to the game, and we saw that this year with a big, more recent breakthrough of a game called Off the Grid. If people aren't super familiar with it, it hit number one and was number one in the Epic Store for a solid period of time. And I think it's a game that not a lot of people who played it knew that they were even playing a Web3 game, but it was just a game that stood on its own 2 feet. Traditional gaming content creators were covering it. Traditional game review sites were covering it. It's because the game kind of transcended the technology that they were using in the stack. And, you know, as we keep talking about, like, that stuff becomes boring when you're doing it right. So definitely does come down to the game at the end of the day. Stefano, any parting thoughts from you here? Sage advice.
Yeah, doubling down on what Francois said, literally doubling down on that, and also the example of the grid is is a remarkable success story, I would say, at the moment, where they literally build a fun game first. They consider Web3 as part of the tech stack, and we're in a point in time where the tech is good. Is as good as you can be fully abstracted for the user. The user doesn't see it, as we've seen in Off the Grid. As Immutable, of course, we also provide services like that allow you to have that kind of experience where the blockchain experience is completely abstracted. And you can see that you can build a successful game. Like, there's nothing stopping traditional studios or new studios to pop up and build great game with Web3 component. And I think here I have my spicy take that I want to just drop in the wild is, I think we're at a point in time where I would love to see a traditional game that is already market. Then from one day to another, just click the switch and their SQL database goes on chain. And the user doesn't need to know. That's your asset are in SQL database in your Firebase backend or whatever backend you're using. Flip the switch is on chain. The user doesn't know. And you enable Web3 features without even knowing. And again, going back to the principle of Web3 should be just an item in your stack.
I think that's a great KPI to track. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind to me, like I came into Web3 gaming kind of because I'm a big CCG player. Like in paper, I play a lot of Magic the Gathering. And so like when I saw Web3 gaming, it was like super intuitive for me. It's like, cool, I can trade these cards, and like games like Gods Unchained on Immutable like are the Web3 versions of this. But the game that I still play in Web2, the digital versions of Magic, you can't trade your friggin' cards. And so I would love if they just made that backend change and then just told the players like, hey, congrats guys, you can can trade your cards now. Cool. So Ben, why don't you close out the trio here, and any sage advice that you have for either game developers or marketers working at this intersection that we keep talking about of mobile and Web3 gaming?
Yeah, I think, what I've been harping on is, having a robust measurement and attribution framework is essential. As I mentioned, you get to understand user behavior. So you're able to track how users interact with both mobile and the Web3 features. So like wallet setups, NFT purchases, and other blockchain elements. This gives you insights into what users, are engaging and what might need improvement on. And then, with that, you also have, ways to optimize user acquisition, and mostly important, identifying high value users. As we all know, not every user is the same. So with having robust measurement, you can identify users who are most likely to engage in a play to earn mechanic or invest in assets. These insights help build targeted marketing strategies that focus on the users who drive the most value. And then, also with the fraud prevention that we mentioned, having a good fraud prevention in check there, and as well as having really insightful reporting. With this solid measurement framework, like Adjust, you're getting valuable reports on performance metrics, retention rates, user engagement. This data can only help both shape your game design and your marketing strategies, which is ensuring that your efforts are aligned with what players value most. And really building a data-driven culture. Having measurement at the core of your strategy really helps foster a culture of continuous improvement. Decisions are based on real analytics rather than intuition, which is crucial in a fast-changing landscape like Web3. So, in a nutshell, leveraging platforms like Adjust isn't just about tracking; it's about optimizing user acquisition, preventing fraud, and creating a sustainable experience for players. This foundation in measurement helps you build and grow effectively, within the evolving Web3 gaming space.
Appreciate that, Ben. That's all good stuff. And I'll just throw in a quick and very simple one from my end, maybe to close it out here, especially for people that are new at this cross section, which is just play some of these friggin' games. The games are getting pretty dang good now, and we're having it to where games with Web3 DNA stand on their own 2 feet, can be number one on Epic Store, can pass 1 million downloads in the App Store. And try Guild of Guardians, try Pooled Masters. These are great examples of games that are breaking through, and the Web3 aspects can be invisible. So I know we covered a lot today, and this can be intimidating, maybe for teams that are individuals that are newer at building this cross section. But these are still games at the end of the day, and a lot of the same principles about what's fun and about how you measure success still apply. So thank you again, guys, for making the time to join us. This was really great. I wish we had 3 hours, but our time is up. And thank you to everyone in the audience who made some time to join us today. Hope you found some value in the session today. Thank you all, and take care. We'll see you soon.